Hi, everybody. It's David Leis here, and it's wonderful to see everybody on Leaders on the Frontier, and we're delighted to see you on this December 19, 2024, the year of our Lord, as we approach this Christmas season and as we look to the promises of a new year of 2025. I want to welcome everybody to the program and just encourage you with all the kind of comments that you encourage us with. We really do appreciate it. It's just amazing the type of comments we get from our discussions, and I am looking forward to this day. We have a very special guest with us, and we'll get to that in a moment as we talk about climate change and climate alarmism. But today I wanted to just reference a little bit about some headlines. There's a lot going on in the news as usual. You may notice that, let's get to it. When we think of the GST holiday for 2 months on particular items, what do you think about that? Was it kind of a gimmick, a political gimmick, or does it have any policy substance? I know we've alluded to this before in previous discussions. I did want to recommend to you, to make sure if you don't get it already, is to subscribe to the Frontier Center for Public Policy newsletter. It's interesting. In this week, there's a fantastic analysis, an article by Dr. Marco Navarro-Gini and the headline is the GST Holiday, a smokescreen for scandal. So it's an incisive analysis, but basically says, give us a break. The GST break is kind of nonsensical and it's a gimmick. You may recall that this past Monday was a day when the Minister of Finance, Christa Freeland, tabled her resignation. And it's interesting, within her letter of resignation, she said a number of things, including the point that, that there's this whole, action regarding a GST holiday is a political stunt, basically. And that was one of the reasons why she resigned. There's Christa Freeland behind the Prime Minister. And this seems like a turning point in this administration. It's interesting when a Minister of Finance no longer has the confidence of the Prime Minister. So what do you think's going on here? What are your comments about the resignation of the Minister of Finance, and what does this mean for the Trudeau administration? It's interesting, in our parliamentary system, the Prime Minister can kind of hang on indefinitely. Now, there are ways that people can speak up, and I believe that there's some 50 MPs within the Liberal caucus that have voiced their concerns and demanded that perhaps now is the time for the Prime Minister to move on. But what do you think? As long as technically the House has the confidence of the House, in other words, there's a majority to keep the government going, it can continue indefinitely. Now, behind the scenes, there's people that can speak up. There's a lot of pressure from public opinion. And meanwhile, the president-elect, again, Trump 2.0, continues to make all kinds of comments about Canada. Perhaps it should become a state of a part of the United States. Here's that famous tweet that was done with Donald Trump overlooking a picturesque Rocky Mountain scene. By the way, I think that mountain looks like the Matterhorn to me. So I'm just curious what you think. And good afternoon to all of you, including Prairie. Good to see you. And so what do you think? Is Donald Trump trolling our Prime Minister as he calls him a governor of another state? Do you think that's a good idea? I mean, it's interesting that he's even communicated that, there's many Canadians that want to become part of the United States as he kind of sets up negotiations. And we know that part of the history was a few years ago where it seems like our Prime Minister doesn't quite see eye to eye with the Donald Trump coming into his role as president. So, we need good relationships between our Prime Minister and our large trading partner, the United States, and neighbor to the south and the north. So, what do you think? What's your comment about what's going on here? Do you think we should become part of the United States? Do you think there's a good chance there will be a 25% tariff come January 20th? Or is it just a negotiation tactic? Or are there real issues that Canada needs to hear when it comes to border security and related matters? So, anyways, there's a lot going on. I also wanted to mention that our topic today is about, of course, climate alarmism and trying to understand what's going on. And we have a very special announcement about a special trip that we'd like to invite all of you to join us. But it's interesting. I wanted to highlight another article within the Frontier newsletter. You can find it on the website. And it's by a senior fellow, Dr. Pierre Gilbert, and he talks about 10 reasons to call out Canada's CO2 crusade. And we'll get to that in a moment, but it's a very interesting article calling that out as well. So enough said. What I'd like to do is turn now to introducing to you a very special guest. His name is Dr. Patrick Moore. And Patrick Moore is a proud senior fellow at Frontier, and he's certainly one of my heroes. He's one of the co-founders of an organization called Greenpeace. And it's very interesting, Patrick. I've learned so much from you over the years about understanding climate science, and he's an author. He's a well-known commentator. So a warm welcome to you, Dr. Patrick Moore.
Thank you very much, David. It's a pleasure to be with you.
And how are you doing, my friend, as we approach Christmas? I'm wearing my candy cane tie. Is that kind of what are you wearing that would denote the season here of Merry Christmas?
Actually, this is one of my Nashville collection.
Okay.
I have shirts collected in various countries, India and Pakistan and other places like that, Mexico. Every country has its own set of designs, so I enjoy studying that.
Well, and I know you have been a world traveler, Patrick, and we're just delighted to see you, and we're honored that you can join us to really bring more light to the issues that we have on hand. Prairie says, yes, there are real problems going on for sure around our world. That's probably one of the understatements of the day. And so, Patrick, we're delighted that you can help us understand what's going on. Now, it's interesting. We refer to you as a doctor, and it's something you told me, is that you were the first PhD in ecology from the University of British Columbia in 1973. So why did you pursue those studies in ecology, Patrick?
Well, I've always loved science and nature in particular, the living part of the world, but ecology also incorporates the non-living part, the rocks, the water, the atmosphere, and indeed many planetary, the ice ages that we've been in for the last 2.6 million years have 100,000-year periods that are based on the gravitational effect of Jupiter, of all things. So just like the moon makes the tides, Jupiter creates these cycles of warmer and colder climate through the last 2.5 million years, which is the first time that ice really got heavy on the poles. And one of the greatest ironies about this climate catastrophe and that we're all going to fry is that this is actually one of the coldest periods in the history of the Earth. But let's just go back 550 million years to when multiple life emerged. Before that, for 3 billion years, all life had been single cells and in the sea. And so it wasn't a very exciting time because you couldn't even see them because they were microscopic. But as multicellular life forms emerged, like mostly jellyfish type things in the beginning, life really started to take control of the Earth, basically, using the Earth's resources to build living things. And it is a miracle. I'm not a particularly religious person, but I am absolutely fascinated with what we couldn't do this. We couldn't make life on Earth. We don't even know how it happened. And we may never know. how it happened, how a bunch of dirt and air and water turned into life. And it is what happened.
It's
So
truly remarkable. And it's fascinating, Patrick, that you reference planetary systems, particularly Jupiter, in its impact on gravitational influences in terms of our climate. Is that
yes,
what you're saying?
it's a fact, and it's quite a significant, very, starting 2.6 million years ago, there's been about 45 glacial maximums in the Pleistocene Ice Age. The greatest irony of this whole thing, well, there's two actually, but the one that has to do with ice is that this ice never happened until about 5 million years ago. Before that, for 250 million years, there was no ice on either pole. Antarctica was forested, and the Arctic Ocean was ice-free, full of life, with lots of trees growing on the islands. So
Wow.
that is just a fact. The Eocene thermal maximum was 50 million years ago, and that was 15 million years after the dinosaur extinction, when it was also very warm everywhere on the Earth and had been for 200 million years before that. So to say that the climate is getting too warm is absolutely ridiculous to anybody who knows that this is the Pleistocene Ice Age, as cold as it's been for 500 million years. There were two other ice ages, the Ionian Ice Age that lasted maybe 50 million years, and then the Karoo Ice Age, which lasted 100 million years way back, 300 million years ago type thing. And then the Earth warmed up and stayed that way for 250 million years until at 50 million years, the Eocene thermal maximum, which was much warmer than it is now, and there was still no ice on either of the poles, began to descend eventually into the Pleistocene Ice Age. So that's the first great irony of this scare story. And the second one is CO2. When we arrived on this planet somehow by becoming an ape that turned into a human, this was the lowest that CO2 had ever been in the history of the Earth, right now, before we started to bring it back up again. It was 10,000 parts per million when modern life emerged out of the sea. It was then 5,000, and then 2,000, and then 1,000. And with the exception of a few blips, it's been going steadily downwards to where at the most recent glacial maximum, which they call the last ice age, but actually it's not the glacial maximums, there's been 40 of them in the ice age. So they make it look as though they call it the last ice age, because last could also mean final. And so therefore it's just going to keep getting warm now forever. But there's absolutely nothing to that. There's no way that's going to happen. This cyclical situation has been in order for 2.5 million years, and there's absolutely no evidence whatsoever that is going to change anytime soon. But then there's the CO2 has gone down to where it got to be 180 ppm during the most recent glacial maximum. When the Earth is colder, CO2 declines. And then when the Earth warms up, CO2 increases. And we've increased it to 425 parts per million from 180. If we hadn't come along, and no other species could have done this, you can't imagine squirrels mining coal and fossil fuels to put CO2 in the atmosphere by building houses to live in and keep warm. So we're the only species that was able to reverse the 500 million year decline in CO2, where it got down to a level where if it had gone down to 150 from 180, life would begin to die. And so we are in fact salvation of life. We are the only species that could have done this. And it would have kept going down, because the reason that CO2 has gone down is because of life, trees being buried in the ground and turned into coal. Those trees contain a huge amount of carbon, and it came from CO2 in the atmosphere and got locked in to the planet. The CO2 that's in the air and the oceans is circulating all the time. It's not stuck somewhere. But hardly anybody knows But the real reason that CO2 has gone down so precipitously is shellfish. Now, how many people
Okay.
would know that?
Dr. Moore, if I could just get you to pause for a sec, because you have given like a huge synopsis in summary form that I think a lot of Canadians would be kind of utterly shocked with. In fact, a lot of people around the world would be. And we've got a lot of chats coming in, questions from our audience. So if you've just joined us, I'm talking with Dr. Patrick Moore, and he has given us a stunning picture of our climate and how, golly, this is a situation, and welcome Bill from Kamloops, BC, but we're in a situation where you're not accepting the typical narrative that we're in a, quote, climate crisis. Is that correct, Patrick?
That is correct. And the other really important thing is that nearly all the scare stories, and this is the subject of my latest book, Fake Invisible Catastrophes and Threats of Doom.
Yes, it's a great book, brilliant book.
And you won't get anywhere near as much out of me in a half hour or whatever. With reading this book, we'll fill in all the blanks. The fact of the matter is, almost all the scare stories, virtually all, are based on things that are either invisible, like CO2 and radiation, and whatever is supposed to be bad in GMO plants. It doesn't even have a name, but the bad thing in GMOs. At least radiation and CO2 are real things, but they're invisible. So the average person can't look at them and see what they're doing, right? So that's how and then remote, invisible or remote. That's why polar bears and coral reefs are the icons for climate change, because hardly what percentage of people go to the Arctic and count the polar bears? The fact is, in 1972, all the Arctic nations, and you never hear about this from Coca-Cola ads or governments, all of the polar bears. In 1972, all the polar nations passed an international treaty to reduce the killing of polar bears because it easy for rich guys to go up there in a plane and get an Inuit guide and go and kill a bunch of polar bears to hang on their wall or put on their floor in front of the fireplace. And so that ended. And since then, the polar bear population has increased by between 5 and 10 times.
So the polar bears are in good shape. Is that what you're saying?
The polar bears have completely recovered from that and are healthy as can be. And the same with the coral reefs. They said in 2016, a bunch of Australian scientists came out to say that 93% of the coral reef, the Great Barrier Reef, is dying. 93% is dying. Most people don't understand that dying doesn't mean dead, right? You could say, "Oh, that person's dying," and then they get up and walk away and live for another 10 years. But the truth is, they're just lying about the coral reefs dying. The warmest waters in the world, which are in the Coral Triangle north of Australia, where cold water can't get to it because it's below China and South Asia and above Australia. That's the warmest oceans in the world, and it's called the Coral Triangle because there are 600 species of coral there and over 2,000 species of reef fish because it's so warm. So when they say if it gets warmer, all the stuff, everything that's living in the warmest oceans now will die. No, they will continue to spread into the places where the water is colder now, if the climate warms. But the climate is not going to warm. We're already 8,000 years into the 70,000 year decline into the next glacial maximum. It's perfectly on time. It takes 10,000 years to come out of one. The last one was 20,000 years ago. 10,000 years we came out of it, reached the Holocene thermal maximum, which it comes out and gets coldest at warmest at first, and then after about 5,000 years it starts to decline, which it has been doing for the last 5,000 years. It was warmer. It was warmer 2,000 years ago in the Roman era than it is now, and they know from the snow level that is easy for scientists to figure out where where the snow came down to. And that's one of the reasons why the people from northern Asia were able to get through the Rockies, is when it started, when it went down after the maximum to the minimum. That's how they were able to get down to Italy and take Rome. So the glaciers and the ice on the Earth have had huge implications for history as well as for climate. But to be worried about the climate getting too warm, we are not an Arctic species. We are, in fact, a tropical species. We evolved at the equator, and if it weren't for fire, shelter, and clothing, all of which are artificial and man-made, if it weren't for that, we couldn't come out of the tropics. We would die in southern Mexico, in the high altitude places.
No, it's a very good point. So human beings like warmth. I mean, that's just who we are as a species. So I'm with Dr. Patrick Moore, one of the co-founders of Greenpeace. We're very lucky to have him on the program as a scientist and someone who's given this issue of climate an incredible amount of thought. We have a lot of questions from the audience here, including from Larry Archer. Is there strong enough climate research to support a correlation between the current modern day warming period and the Roman and medieval warming period? Patrick?
Absolutely, there is. Yes, of course. The Little Ice Age peaked around 1600 AD, so 400 years ago. And we're still coming out of that. It is true that the Earth is still warming a little bit, but it's in one of the coldest periods that the Earth's ever been in that this warming is occurring. It's not getting back up to where it was in 50 million years ago. Nowhere near it, because there was no ice then. And now even after a long 6-month summer, the Arctic still has a massive ice sheet on it. And then in the winter, it comes out of the Arctic into the Bering Sea and into Hudson Bay, beyond lower than the Arctic Circle. So the truth is that these cycles are real. They've measured them in ice cores in Antarctica, where they can go down for thousands of years into the ice. And it's proven. The CO2 curve is there, the temperature curve is there, in proxies in the ice. Oxygen 18, one of the isotopes of oxygen, can be used to trace various aspects of the climate. And the last thing we are in is an Earth that's too hot. This Earth was so much warmer for most of its existence. These periods of ice age are small compared to the massive hundreds of millions of years when there wasn't any ice on the poles and life existed. So they say, yeah, but humans weren't here yet then, because we only really came along 500,000 years ago, and even then we were kind of still like apes. But so they say that, but that's not the point. We wouldn't be here if our ancestors, going back to the beginning of life, had not had successful reproduction since the beginning of life.
Okay, so, but Dr. Moore, surely something is going on here with our climate. We've had incidences of hurricanes and floods and all kinds of, quote, extreme weather. I go to the Weather Channel and I see weather warnings every other week of some extreme weather incident. Surely that is proof that humans are destroying this climate and we're in big trouble. You seem to be totally contrary to that.
Totally. It's totally ridiculous to say that, because the Earth has been going through calamities, and the number of people that have died in weather events has gone down by about 100% practically. Just in the last couple of 100 years, when there weren't any early warnings for hurricanes, for example. Now people have 2 days, 3 days to get ready for a hurricane. And we build stronger structures now. But if you look at Haiti, for example, they use inferior concrete, and then there's an earthquake and the whole thing falls on their heads. They lost 200 200,000 people or so died in the one they had that happened after the Japanese earthquake, where no one died from the earthquake. Not one person.
Not
20,000
one
people
person.
died from the tidal wave. People didn't cause the tidal wave. The earth caused that. It's not as if we're shaking the earth so much that
Okay.
it, you know.
No, I mean it. No, it's very convincing arguments that you make, Dr. Moore, and I find it fascinating that it's so juxtaposition to kind of statements. I know that the former President Barack Obama said there's a consensus among scientists that climate change is real. It's being driven by humans, and that it's a catastrophic concern. In fact,
They're all
what
on
is
the
it?
make, David.
Sorry, there. So what's
On
driving
the
this? Your
money,
money.
and
Follow the money.
and the worst thing is it's public money. You don't see people that are working for big industrial corporations coming out with this kind of garbage. They're trying to do something useful, right? They're not going into the climate crisis in General Motors. They're building something that everybody needs and wants for a lifestyle like we have today. And these other people are parasites that are scaring us about something that is invisible. And again, back to GMOs. They are saying there's something bad in GMOs, and they don't even know what its name is. And yet people buy it. Wouldn't it be sort of normal to say, well, okay, what is the bad thing that's in there? What is it called?
Yes.
Has it got a name? No, it doesn't.
Right.
It
So,
should
so
be a
you're okay. So this is fascinating. You are a scientist, and obviously the statement that Barack Obama made about there's a consensus among scientists is absurd because
It is.
I know many scientists, including yourself, that don't believe this thesis.
Yep.
And secondly, that's not how science works. Science works on a healthy debate and skepticism. You can't just you don't achieve science by consensus. I mean, that's absurd. So, we're getting at something deeper here. And there's a comment by Steve Smith who says, I think weather modification manipulation has had the most detrimental effect than anything else. Sorry, I just missed the comment here. I'm just trying to get that there. My apologies. I had the comment here. The governments have been manipulating our climate for longer than anyone realizes. I guess I think the
governments
comment
are
is
not
getting at there's manipulation going on.
David, the people are not making the climate. Not even the scientists. Not even people who have grandiose ideas. Let's go back to the beginning of Greenpeace. It was 1971 when 13 of us went on a haywire old halibut boat across the Pacific Ocean to Amchitka in the Aleutians to stop the U.S. hydrogen bomb testing. We succeeded. Nixon canceled them not long after. That was the last hydrogen bomb the U.S. ever detonated. Second, we went down to the French Polynesia, which was a long way to go, but a nicer climate. And we protested against the atmospheric nuclear tests that France was still doing in 1972 and 3. We stopped them in 1974. That was the end of that.
Wow.
Then we went out into the deep Pacific because a person came to us who was studying whales in captivity and had learned all about whaling in the ocean and had found out that they were still killing 30,000 great whales in the Pacific, the Japanese and the Russians, between the two of them. We went out there and stopped that. That took 5 years of voyages, all of which myself and my wife were on. And
wow.
we had 30 people on those boats. And we went out and got in the way of the whalers and got filmed back to the shore to show people what was going on out there and seeing the sea full of blood and the harem of sperm whales are a harem species with a male and a number of females. And so they try to kill the male first so that the females will all come to try to protect him. And then they kill all those right in front of your face. And so then after that, we went on the baby seal hunt, which didn't give us an awful lot of help in Canada because a lot of Canadians are patriotic and they were all they were doing was killing baby seals. But if you've seen it in real life, you see the hunter come with a club while the mother is still nursing its pup, and bash the pup over the head, skin it in front of its mother, and then drag it away and club the mother over the head so the mother will know not to follow, right? Well, after that incident, I saw the mother seal waddle down and put its skinned baby under its cheek, under its chin, and wept. They like us, they can actually weep because they're a mammal.
Horrible.
And so those are the kind of things we did. But then Greenpeace got basically, I'd say, infiltrated by the left to such an extent that there was no science left in hardly anybody. And in the end, I was the only person with formal science education in the board of directors of Greenpeace. They were all politicos. And nothing wrong with being a politician, except I'm sure glad I'm not one. And although they are required, this made me have to leave because my fellow directors, none of whom had any formal science education, said, okay, our next campaign is to ban chlorine worldwide. Because chlorine is in a lot of poisonous materials. We use it to kill bacteria. It's a very effective bleach, for example. That's made with chlorine. But also, adding chlorine to drinking water was the biggest advance in the history of public health and to spas and pools. Table salt, sodium chloride, is an essential nutrient for all animals. Essential. And even plants use a bit of it. And so then, in addition to that, there is an addition to that somewhere. Oh yes, so many very, very important things are made with chlorine chemistry. And so banning chlorine worldwide is just a simply stupid thing. Mahatma Gandhi marched to the sea with a huge train of people behind him by the time he got there and made salt.
Indeed, yes.
The British were overtaxing the poor people in India because they needed salt, so they had to pay. And so he won that. He got that tax removed. And so so here I am, a PhD scientist understanding chemistry and biology and biochemistry, which I was more in the life sciences because I did my undergraduate degree in forestry and biology. So the science of life. But when you go into ecology, then you start looking at the fertility of the soil and what's in the air and what the world's climate is and all those things. And so I've got quite a wide range of knowledge gathered through now 77 years. Well, I guess my first 5 I didn't learn a lot, but my parents gave me the books of knowledge when I was 12. There, can't see how big it's in here, but
it's a remarkable story. And if you've just joined us, I'm talking with Dr. Patrick Moore. His most recent book, he's written a lot of, I think, spectacular books, very insightful ones. I would recommend them all. But his most recent book is called Fake Invisible Catastrophes and Threats of Doom. So make sure you look at that one. And we've got a lot of questions from our audience. It's interesting comments. And by the way, welcome from David from the UK. We've got people from across the country. And it's interesting. Bill Lingerwood says, the media do such a great job of changing the language. What does it say here? A frontal system hitting the West Coast is now referred to as a bomb cyclone. Summer is now a, quote, heat dome. What's Dr. Moore's take on this? What do you say, Patrick?
Propaganda, exaggeration.
Okay.
And those aren't meant to be part of an intellectual discussion. Exaggeration is just plain exaggeration, making it seem worse than it is. And let me use the example of plastic. The Great Pacific garbage patch, made mainly of plastic, is bigger than Texas. Twice the size of Texas, in fact, the plastic garbage patch. Except when you fly over the Pacific Ocean, you can't even see anything. And then they say, well, it's just the clear plastic. These are things that people have said after my speaking. See, well, it's just the clear plastic. No, clear plastic sinks, actually. It's denser than colored plastic because the dye in the colored plastic gives it the ability to be lighter. And then they say, well, it's just underwater, right? And that's why you can't see it, because it's just only a few feet down there where you can't see it. Well, things don't work that way. They either float or stay.
So just to clarify, so you're referring, Patrick, to the claims that in the Pacific Ocean, there is this monster, humongous island of floating plastic
Right.
that is bigger than Texas.
Yes. It's all, you go on the internet and look at there's all kinds of images of it, except they're all photoshopped. They're not a picture. The one picture is the satellite image from the German satellite that's been going around for quite a few years. Every time they go around, they take a full vision of the Earth. And so in the Pacific, for example, it's going to be cloudy in a quarter of it or a half of it for any given day. But if you do it for a year, you get to see everywhere in the Pacific Ocean, right? They just take the clouds out of it because clouds aren't plastic. And so they take the clouds out, and then you've got an image. It's in my book, which shows you there is absolutely nothing. You can see the Hawaiian Islands quite clearly. And even the largest one is not as big as Texas.
Yes.
So it's a lie, an absolute outright lie. But the big lie is that plastic is poisonous. That's why we wrap all our food in it, right? That's why we protect all our food from contamination by using plastic containers and film.
Okay, so, but what the heck is going on here then? Because surely when it comes to responsible public decision making, we should be basing our decisions based on healthy debate to get to the facts, to get to evidence, because truth matters. And in this case, you're saying, no, there's a lot of stuff that's being said that is just simply not factual.
Precisely, especially the one about the microplastic. Oh,
microplastics.
Yeah, well, how convenient. You can't see it, right? It's because it's microplastic, and it's in the oceans everywhere, and it's in our drinking water, and it's in our food, and it's getting into our blood, and it's getting into our brains. They say these things in otherwise decent-looking books and magazines. They publish this stuff. And there's no way that your body is going to take plastic into your veins. There's a reason why the colon is able to sort out what it wants to expel and what it wants to take in, right? And it only takes in what your body needs. It doesn't take in plastic. And yet people are saying it is, and nobody can disprove them because it's invisible, right? But the cell walls on every cell in your body are there to make sure nothing gets in past that. After it's gone through your colon and into your blood veins and to all the cells, of which there are some 3 trillion or something, and so they are, for want of a better word, bastardizing the whole of science these days, the whole of it, except for the people that are actually doing something useful, like building airplanes and cars and roads and growing our food and stuff like that. The farmers are just being made to appear like criminals because they're using chemicals, right? Everything is made of a chemical. We are made of chemicals.
Yeah, we're made of chemicals. Yes.
There's nothing else but chemicals.
Right. But what you're doing is you are just doing a full challenge of the narrative that is across our society that has taken a hold of our minds and our hearts. It's like these words are being used to manipulate our emotion, because everyone who doesn't care about the environment. So if you can use words to push and manipulate our compassion and emotion, that's a very powerful way to make change. So I'm with Dr. Patrick Moore. Please share this discussion with people. Like us, so we get the word out in terms of this perspective. This is one that is often not heard or understood within the larger public, and it matters. So I do have a comment from Lee Harding. He says, "Hi, Patrick. David Suzuki, that so-called environmental scientist or environmentalist, says called you the Judas of the environmental movement. would you like to comment on David Suzuki, please? What do you think? Is that a fair comment, Patrick Moore?
No, it certainly is not. He probably should have stuck to those flies he was uh, experimenting with in his lab at UBC. Um, he, for some reason, went from being relatively scientific, and indeed, I took his 2-year course in biochemistry and uh, the whole process of our genes producing us and keeping us alive and making us continue to be alive. And he was a very good teacher at that level. But he somehow became uh, like a pop figure. Uh, he got really good exposure on TV, and I think it must have gone to his head. I don't know why he would take the positions he's taking now, and they certainly aren't correct, especially the climate one. I mean, this is one of the coldest periods in Earth's history, and I can prove it. Right? Just get the graphs out and show people. Those are all in my book too. And
But I think though, isn't this kind of comment, if it's accurate, reflect kind of it goes to words or tone or languages that too often, and I certainly known you for a number of years, Dr. Moore, is that you're very much into the debate around the facts and the thesis of the science, not making ad hominem attack. I mean, this is always a red flag, isn't it? When someone calls you, well, in this case, a Judas or something like that. I mean, seriously. I mean, let's get down to the issues.
Yeah, he wasn't the first one. Bob Hunter coined that term for me, and he was part of Greenpeace as well, and my best friend. And I called him my best friend and my best enemy, and because I just didn't take it seriously because he was just clearly he was against cutting trees down. That's what it came down to. And I don't know of any other way to get wood. I don't think there is another way to get wood besides cutting some trees. And the nice thing about trees is they grow back. Well, steel doesn't grow back. Concrete doesn't grow back. And you have to get rid of the old steel and the old concrete, and it's a big, ugly mess. Whereas with trees, they're such a beautiful product of nature. And now, people don't realize that in Europe, they're all still going on about all the forests are disappearing. The forests of Europe, when there was no fossil fuels back in the 1600s, everything was the energy of heat was all done with trees, with wood. And so over the few, and by now industry had begun, and so steel mills were running on wood fire, and all the big plants, glass works. So the trees of Eastern and Western Europe put together ended up becoming only 9% of Europe. Today it's 43.
Wow, that's a great story.
43% of Europe is forested. And then they go, oh, well, those are kind of fake trees because they grew them in a plantation or something,
But they're still trees, aren't they?
Yeah, they still are trees, and they still have wood in them. They're not paper.
Wow. Isn't that interesting? No, and I think there's a perspective here. There's a lot of good things going on in our environment. Like I think I've seen, like you have, all the kinds of data that show that our world is moving in the right direction. There are certainly exceptions, but that's something to celebrate. I do have a question from Lisa Willcox. What about BPA as an endocrine disruptor?
That's not my field. That's you need a doctor.
Okay, so that's perhaps a different field in terms of physiology, if I get the question.
Well, endocrine disruptor just means that it's interfering with your biology,
Yes.
and making something not happen that should happen.
Okay.
But I'm not. I did actually do human biochemistry, but this is a health and chemistry question in one.
But it is an interesting question. But thank you very much, Lisa, and everyone else for your questions. I do have a question related to your statement about money, the green industry, in quotes, and the Trump administration, because we do have a significant announcement to talk about today, and I don't want to miss that. But it has to do with this. I know that you've spoken eloquently about the absurdities of the quote green industry, in the sense that my understanding is much of the green industry is heavily subsidized, whether it's windmills, solar. There's a variety of them. I mean, I'm not saying that one shouldn't use them, because you can evaluate them, like, as long as you don't subsidize them, look at them as another potential form of energy. But what's your take on green energy? Is it a good thing, Patrick, as you look across that industry?
I could talk for about 3 hours straight on that one. Well, the first thing to note is that green is a color.
Indeed.
It is not a science word. It is not a technical word. It is not an engineering word. It is a color. So they say that wind and solar are renewable, therefore green. Windmills aren't renewable. Solar panels aren't renewable. They just aren't. Nature makes the wind. Nature makes the sun. It's not us. And not only that, it takes up massive areas of land and the ocean now, especially where the endangered whales are off the east coast of the US, and all the humpbacks, which aren't endangered, but they may well be if they put all those windmills out there. And so we don't need that. We have nuclear energy. The United States, under Trump, I think, will now finally put in motion a large-scale plan for replacing fossil fuels with nuclear energy. I'm not against burning fossil fuels. They were grown in the forest and grown in the seas. But they ended up in the dirt and in the bottom of the ocean. And now we're taking them out and using them and adding CO2 to the atmosphere. But this is a really interesting point. Only about 10% of the increase in CO2 that we have caused is from fossil fuels.
Only 10%.
The reduction in CO2 that occurred was 90% by shellfish. The shells of shellfish are made with calcium carbonate. They've been here for 500 million years. And they've been dropping those shells on the ocean floor where they get locked in the mud. So that's where we don't realize how many ocean species have shells. All kinds of barnacles, the mussels, the shellfish, the shrimp. Those shrimp have calcium carbonate shells. And so that's really an important point, because what should we do? Should we kill all the shellfish? No, we should recycle what can be recycled, and that is the fossil fuels. But once the fossil fuels are gone, which might be 1,000 years from now for all we know, we haven't found it all by any means. And nuclear energy will come into play a much larger role. Nuclear energy will last for tens of thousands of years, if not more. People don't realize that the nuclear fuel we are using now is only a microscopic amount of how much there really is. We're using the uranium-235 now, which is only 7% of natural uranium. The uranium-238, which is a different molecule, I forget the name now, but it's different, and it isn't immediately fissile. You can't just use it as a fuel like you can uranium-235, which nuclear weapons are made with too. But then there is the thorium. Now they talk about thorium reactors. Thorium isn't a fuel by itself. You can't burn thorium. You have to turn it into into uranium-233 in a reactor. So in the future, all our reactors will be producing new fuel, and in many cases producing more new fuel than they used from isotopes that are not able to be used as fuel directly. But as soon as you turn them into a fuel isotope, they can make more fuel with all the rest of it. So there's thousands of times more nuclear fuel than we have now when we start building these breeder reactors, as they're called. And they mean breeder because they breed more fuel than they use up.
Mm-hmm.
The Russians have 3 of them on the Caspian Sea working perfectly. And that is the way to go for the future. But we don't need to do that really right yet, because there's still tons of normal uranium-230, 235. And so nuclear could take out a huge percentage. The only problem with nuclear, at least with our technology now, is they have to run continuously. So they are base load electricity.
Mm-hmm.
You want to build your base, which is the lowest point it goes, but then it goes up here, you've got to use something else. Or because you can't just start up a nuclear reactor in 5 minutes like you can a gas plant, or even an oil-fired plant, and even a coal plant. You can regulate it to some extent, although it's a bit like the uranium in that you more or less use those as base load. The gas plants are the most interesting in that they can be taken up and down any day, any time of day, any amount. You can get up to their full power or go down to nothing in a very, very short time. So they will be really important for a long time. People don't understand that the different technologies have different characteristics, different abilities to do certain parts of the system. It's a very complex system, and this is amazing that everybody's electrified. I mean, that didn't happen 200 years ago. Only 200 years ago.
Yeah, no, it's truly remarkable. And that kind of technology, including electricity, has really made this incredible country inhabitable. I mean, we're a very cold, relatively cold country. It's interesting, there's another comment from Larry Archer who says, given the fact that climate change narrative is using fear to make their money, can real climate scientists combat this narrative to convince regular folks that they have been lied to? Great question, Larry.
Yes, that is a great question. And yes, there are many people, especially in the think tanks, Heartland Institute and the like, that are actually doing real science. They're sometimes getting grants, or they're like I'm a director of the CO2 Coalition in Arlington, just outside DC, and we have about 200 now really solid scientists, people who have excelled, and we even have one Nobel Prize winner.
Indeed, yes.
And we won't let anybody come in unless we agree that they can, because we don't want charlatans in this movement. And we are now growing very rapidly by using direct mail to educate people in just the general population about the real truth of these issues. And
now, are you sensing though, Dr. Moore, that the climate narrative is actually breaking down now? It's kind of falling down. The science isn't really there to support it. You've got a lot of people going more public and speaking up, but you also have an incoming Trump administration that's not going to fund this kind of, these are other person's words, but fake science. It's kind of like there's a kind of an industry that's been propped up by endless government grants to sustain this kind of narrative. Is that a game-changing situation as we look to a new Trump administration in the new year?
Yes, it is. That's so. I mean, he's got a lot of nerve to call Trudeau a governor of a new state, but it is funny, and we got to get rid of him because he's fired 3 top women cabinet members in his career, and he said he was going to be equal to everybody, and puts himself as a feminist. You know, I mean, I think he's totally phony, and he doesn't like plastic either. He's against plastic straws. You know, when you take a drink container and replace the plastic straw with one of those bubbles that with the top that they make it out of plastic too.
Yes, good point. So the whole idea of introducing cardboard soggy, crappy straws that don't work. Does that have any environmental benefit? I mean, the last time I checked, there was a report suggesting that they actually have chemical issues as well. So, does any of this substitution, like if you go to a grocery store, I want a plastic bag that works. I don't want something else that gets dirty and messy and
or
let
wet.
alone a, like,
Yeah.
why are we doing this, Patrick?
We're doing it because we're being forced to do it by naive and perhaps somewhat ignorant people. That everything is made of chemicals, and a lot of people think, oh my God, it's got chemicals in it. But everything is made of chemicals. Absolutely, the whole world is made of chemicals. Whether
Indeed, it is.
water
Yes.
is a chemical,
Right.
and
But this is a cautionary tale where you have kind of an ideology and others that seek kind of a political narrative or advantage, and they're kind of imposing decisions that are not based on good public policy. I think that's part of the punchline here. So Steve Smith says they give you a paper straw in a plastic wrapper. Isn't that ironic? Oh gosh, you can't make this up. This is crazy. So I do
you
have
should be
a
required
very
to use a wrapper.
okay. Yes. So, I mean, you've got to see the humor in life here, and this is no exception. So, I did want to also share with our audience a special invitation, and that is that we have an exciting Alaska cruise tour coming up on August 19, 2025. And this is a week-long cruise coming out of the port of Vancouver up on the Grand Princess. We have a picture of this incredible ship. And we will be enjoying this cruise with our guest of honor, and his name is Dr. Patrick Moore. And so we're delighted that you, Patrick, will and your lovely wife will be joining us, as well as Ray McGinnis, the author of the book Unjustified, a great book. And this will be an incredible cruise. The dining will be fabulous, and we will have a up close tour of the coastline with Canada's first PhD in ecology, no less. And you can find out more information about the cruise by emailing info@fcpp.org. And our colleague Patrick Lane would be delighted to hear from you. Again, that's info@fcpp.org. We have group rates that I think offer an extraordinary value on this cruise, but we're going to have a hour program every day. There'll also be some social activities, and we've already got quite a few signups of people joining us on this cruise in August. So we're really excited about it. Are you excited about joining us on this cruise as our guest of honor, Patrick Moore?
Absolutely, I wouldn't turn that down. Eileen and I have done an Alaska cruise with the Rebel.
Oh, yes,
Ezra,
of course.
Ezra Levant and his crew. That was back when he was still a pretty small outfit, and he's really made something of his organization. Ezra is one of my favorite people in the world. He has absolutely total bravery. He will. Nothing stops him.
Well, and I think of bravery. I think of you, Patrick, in terms of your incisive discussion today, and I think it's going to be a terrific time as we get to know and make new friends as part of this group. I will be your host for the cruise, and I'm looking forward to our discussions as we talk about a myriad of both current topics and issues, as well as issues regarding climate science. And so I just encourage people to find out more information on this extraordinary opportunity. I think it'll be a once-in-a-lifetime trip, and we invite people to join us and look into it. Again, you can find out more information at info@fcpp.org. So in the meantime, as we wrap up this discussion, Patrick, we've learned a lot about your take on the quote climate crisis, and I think you've given us what I refer to as reality therapy. That look, it's okay. The sky is not falling. We do want to, of course, be mindful of the environment. What's the biggest thing we can do as Canadians as we look to the environment in this country? What are things that you'd advise us to do if we care about the environment?
Well, that's a bit of a tough one. I mean, it isn't as bad as they are all saying in the first place. Our forests are being managed very carefully. But there's these people who think it's wrong to cut a tree down, never mind 10,000. But they are renewable, just like humans
Yes.
are.
Right.
And so not that I'm asking people to kill each other.
No.
No, you leave your own species alone. But the best thing to do is to just keep pace with people who are being reasonable about these things, and don't listen to the propagandists, and study for yourself. Honestly, if you do read my book, which is on Amazon for a reasonable
It
price,
is.
and you will perish in flames is from Ghostbusters, when Mark Moranis walked up to the horse and buggy in Central Park and yelled at the horse, "You will perish in flames." And it's a good exaggeration, and that's what they're saying to us. You will perish with plastic. You will perish with technology, and it's
Okay.
simply not true. Most of us are doing a good job, and it's really nice to know that India and China, and this is not about politics, are not buying into this stuff. Neither is, between Western Europe and North America and some of South America, that's where all this propaganda is coming from. It's not coming. It's not coming from, like, actually, if you add it up, way more than half the world's population is not involved in this scam. And we just happen to be in the richest countries in the world, where I don't know, are we spoiled? What is it that makes us want to do this? Why aren't our children getting educated properly about these things? And they're not. And I saw a piece on the U.S. TV today about the influence of legalizing marijuana in school kids. They're coming to school with it, and gummies especially, because there's no smoke, and that is interfering with their learning. And I'm not against tightly controlled substances, especially the ones that can kill you, which doesn't include pot. But these are tough issues, and the issue of men pretending they're women and going into the women's washrooms and stuff, that these things it's insane.
It is. Well, I think, Patrick, what you've done today is very admirable, and I want to thank you for spending time with today and challenging us to renew ourselves in terms of knowledge and science, and to be able to see what's going on and also celebrate the things that are going on well in our environment. So I want to thank you very much for joining us today, Patrick, and thank our audience as well. We've had an outstanding set of questions and comments. And so thank you for joining us today, and we'll look forward to our next week's discussion at the same time and same place on Thursday. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much, David. I've enjoyed being with you, and hope I can see you again soon I will, in August.
You will.
On
And be sure to join us on the cruise for sure.
My wife and I will sit at a different table each day, if there's that many tables. And so we can all have conversations with a smaller group of people, and be in a beautiful environment. We're going up the west coast of Vancouver Island and down the east coast. I've only gone on the east coast before, and I was born on the west coast of Vancouver Island in Winter Harbor, the most northern harbor on the west coast of Vancouver Island. And I still have a home there, which we built 50 years ago by hand. And
Wow.
we go there all the time. It's only 75 kilometers of gravel road from Port Hardy. And so we have this beautiful summer place. We go there in the winter too, because we got a nice warm fireplace. And seeing the west coast of Vancouver Island, I just can't wait, because I haven't seen it all. I've seen the east coast many times, but so come on down.
All right. Well, we're looking forward to it. And again, thank you very much, Dr. Patrick Moore, and thank you everyone for joining us on Leaders on the Frontier. Have a great day. And Merry Christmas, everyone.
Merry Christmas, everyone.